My name is Jesse Morgan, and at 32 years old, I should have been helping run our family construction business in Boston. 3 generations, 50 years of reputation, all leading to the moment I walked in with my engineering degree and fresh ideas. Instead, I heard the words that changed everything. You are not qualified. My own father rejecting me from our legacy. Little did he know 6 months later, I would be sitting across the table as his biggest potential client. Before I tell you how it happened, drop a comment letting me know where you are watching from. Hit that like button and subscribe to see how I went from family outcast to becoming my own father's boss. Growing up as a Morgan meant growing up in construction. My earliest memories are the smell of sawdust and the sound of hammers watching my father Robert and Uncle Thomas transform our grandfather's small operation into Morgan Construction, one of the most respected firms in Boston. Our company built everything from luxury condos downtown to school buildings in the suburbs. The Morgan name meant quality, reliability, and tradition. My grandfather Harold Morgan started the business with just a truck and a toolbox back in the 70s. By the time I was born, it had already grown into a mid-sized operation, and my father and uncle had ambitious plans to expand it further. Grandpa Harold was the one who first put a hammer in my hand when I was 7 years old. While my father was always busy with clients, and my uncle buried in paperwork, Grandpa would take me to job sites on weekends. "Jesse boy," he would say, "see how that foundation is poured. That is the most important part of any building. If your foundation is weak, nothing you build on top will stand the test of time." I took those words to heart, not just about buildings, but about life. Throughout elementary and high school, my summers were spent on construction sites first, just observing, then helping with simple tasks, and by my late teens, I was working alongside the crews. The foremen and workers all knew me as Little Morgan, and I soaked up every bit of knowledge they were willing to share. When it came time for college, there was no question about my path. I enrolled at MIT to study civil engineering, specifically focusing on sustainable construction methods. This was 2010, when green building was gaining momentum, but still considered somewhat experimental by old school builders like my father and uncle. But I saw the future. Energy-efficient designs, renewable materials, lower carbon footprints. These weren't just trendy concepts, but necessary evolutions in our industry. I graduated with honors, then went on to complete an advanced degree in sustainable construction management. During those years, I kept in touch with the family business, coming home for holidays and occasionally consulting on small projects. My father seemed proud of my academic achievements, though he would often joke, "All that theory is fine, but real building happens with boots on the ground." I was determined to prove that my theory had practical applications that could benefit Morgan Construction. The industry was changing. New regulations around energy efficiency were being implemented. Clients were increasingly asking about environmental impact, and our competitors were starting to advertise their green credentials. After completing my education, I returned to Boston full of excitement and ideas. I had spent months developing detailed proposals for how Morgan Construction could integrate sustainable practices without sacrificing the quality and reliability we were known for. I had spreadsheets showing potential cost savings designs incorporating innovative materials and marketing strategies to attract environmentally conscious clients. The night before my first official day at the family business, I could barely sleep. I laid out my best suit, prepared extra copies of my proposals, and practiced the presentation I planned to give my father and uncle. This was my moment to show them that I had honored our family legacy while preparing it for the future. When I arrived at the Morgan Construction offices that Monday morning, I was greeted warmly by Linda, our receptionist who had known me since I was in diapers. "Look at you," she said, "all grown up and ready to take over the world." I smiled, adjusted my tie nervously, and replied, "Just hoping to make a good impression today." Other employees stopped by to welcome me back, from accounting staff to project managers I had known for years. Many expressed excitement about having fresh blood in the company leadership. I felt encouraged by their reception. The project managers in particular seemed interested in my ideas. Over coffee in the break room, I shared some of my thoughts with Tom Grayson, our senior project manager who had been with the company for 20 years. "You know, Jesse," he said thoughtfully, "your timing might be perfect. We lost a bid last month to Baker Construction specifically because they offered a green alternative that the client preferred. Your dad was furious." This information bolstered my confidence. I was solving a problem the company was already facing. As I walked toward my father's office for our scheduled meeting, I felt certain that once he saw the research and potential for growth, he would embrace the direction I was proposing. I was ready to earn my place in Morgan Construction, not through nepotism, but through merit and innovation. They might be skeptical at first, I told myself as I knocked on my father's door, but the numbers will speak for themselves. Little did I know that numbers, logic, and market trends would matter far less than tradition, fear, and family dynamics in the conversation I was about to have. The meeting was set for 10 in the morning in my father's corner office. When I arrived, I found not just my father but also my Uncle Thomas waiting. They sat behind the large mahogany desk that had once belonged to my grandfather, presenting a united front. I should have recognized this as the first warning sign. "Good morning," I said, cheerfully setting my portfolio on the desk. "I am excited to get started." My father nodded curtly. "Have a seat, Jesse. We need to discuss your role here." I sat down, still optimistic, and began to open my portfolio. "Actually, I have prepared some proposals that I think will really help us grow in new markets." Before I could continue, my Uncle Thomas raised his hand to stop me. "We have already determined your starting position. You will be working with the administrative team to learn our systems from the ground up." I blinked in confusion. Administrative team? But I have already interned here during summers. I know the basic operations. My father leaned forward, his expression stern. "This is not a negotiation. Everyone who joins management at Morgan Construction starts by understanding our paperwork and processes. Your degree does not exempt you from this." Trying to maintain my composure, I pulled out the first of my proposals. "I understand that, but I think once you see what I have been working on, you might reconsider. The industry is moving towards sustainable building practices, and we have an opportunity to position ourselves ahead of the curve." As I tried to hand the document to my father, he did not take it. Instead, he sighed heavily. "Jesse, these untested green methods may be what they taught you in school, but we have built our reputation on proven approaches. Morgan Construction stands for reliability, not experimental techniques that could compromise structural integrity or blow budgets." "But they are not experimental," I protested. "Many of these methods have been implemented successfully in Europe for years, and they are becoming standard practice here too. Baker Construction just won a contract over us because of their sustainable options." At the mention of our competitor, my uncle's face darkened. "Tom Grayson should not have shared that information with you. That bid had other complications." I pressed on, feeling my opportunities slipping away. "The data shows that clients are increasingly prioritizing environmental impact. We could differentiate ourselves." My father stood up, effectively ending the discussion. "You are not qualified to change how we have built our reputation. Morgan Construction has thrived for 50 years using methods we know work. You will start in administration, learn our way of doing things, and maybe in a few years we can revisit some of your ideas." The words "not qualified" hit me like a physical blow. After years of education and preparation, my own father did not believe in my abilities or vision. Over the following weeks, I found myself assigned to the most basic administrative tasks: tracking material orders, filing permits, and updating project schedules. It was work that any recent graduate could have done, not someone with an advanced degree in construction management. When I tried to offer suggestions during team meetings, I was either ignored or quickly dismissed. "That is not how we do things here" became a phrase I heard almost daily. Meanwhile, my cousin James, Uncle Thomas's son, who had only a basic business degree, was given a project manager role, despite having less experience than me. One afternoon, I discovered that James was pursuing construction methods for a new apartment complex that would use nearly twice the energy resources necessary. When I prepared an alternative approach and attempted to share it with him privately, he laughed. "Look, cousin," he said condescendingly, "stop trying to turn everything into a science project. This is a business, not a laboratory." That evening, I attempted to speak with my father at home, hoping that away from the office he might be more receptive. I found him in his study, reviewing blueprints. "Dad, can we talk about my role at the company?" I asked. He barely looked up. "There is nothing to discuss. You need to prove yourself before taking on more responsibility." "How can I prove myself filing paperwork? My skills are being wasted." He finally put down his pencil and looked at me. "Your problem, Jesse, is that you think your fancy degree means you know better than people who have been building for decades. Real experience trumps classroom theory every time." "But the industry is changing," I insisted. "We have lost 3 bids in the past 2 months to companies offering sustainable alternatives. And you think you could have won those bids?" he asked, skeptically. "I think I could have helped," I replied. He shook his head. "When you understand how this business really works, then we will talk. Until then, do your job and stop undermining our methods." The conversation ended there, and an uncomfortable tension followed us to dinner. My mother noticed the strain, but her attempts to mediate only made things worse. Business is business, my father said firmly when she suggested he give my ideas a chance. It does not belong at the dinner table. As weeks turned into months, my frustration grew. I watched as Morgan Construction continued to use outdated methods, waste resources, and lose bids to more forward-thinking competitors. The worst part was seeing my cousin James take credit for small efficiency improvements that had clearly come from snippets of my proposals that had circulated around the office. At family gatherings, the divide became increasingly obvious. My grandfather, now 82 and retired, seemed to be the only one who understood my position. "They are afraid of change," he told me quietly during a Sunday dinner. "Your father built this company his way, and admitting there might be a better approach feels like failure to him." "But it is not about failure," I said. "It is about evolution and growth." Grandpa patted my hand. "I know that, and deep down so does he. Give him time." But time only seemed to make things worse. The company's financial records, which I had access to through my administrative role, showed declining profits and lost opportunities. Yet whenever I tried to connect these issues to our reluctance to innovate, I was shut down. The realization slowly dawned on me. My father did not see innovation as an opportunity, but as a threat to everything he had built. And as long as that was true, I would never have a meaningful role in shaping the future of Morgan Construction. 6 months into my employment at Morgan Construction, my role remained unchanged. I arrived each morning, completed the same administrative tasks, attended meetings where my input was neither sought nor welcomed, and left each evening feeling increasingly hollow. The prestigious degree hanging in my apartment seemed to mock me daily. Through my position in administration, I had access to the company's financial records. What I saw alarmed me. Morgan Construction's profits had declined by 18% over the past year. We had lost 7 major bids to competitors offering sustainable building options. Our operating costs were rising due to inefficient material usage and outdated equipment. These were exactly the issues my proposals had addressed, yet no one would listen. One Tuesday afternoon, I was delivering quarterly reports to the conference room when I overheard my father and uncle in heated discussion. Not wanting to interrupt, I paused outside the door. "Sustainable developments is exactly the kind of client we need right now," my father was saying, his voice tense. "Their Boston project would keep us operating in the black for the next 2 years. I know that my uncle responded, but their RFP specifically asks for demonstrated experience with green building methods. We cannot fabricate experience we do not have. Then we downplay that requirement in our proposal, my father said. Once we get our foot in the door, we can figure it out. Robert, they specifically dropped Carlson Brothers because they could not meet their sustainability requirements. What makes you think we would be any different?" Their voices lowered, and I could no longer hear the conversation, but I had heard enough. Sustainable Developments was a major player in commercial real estate, known for their commitment to environmentally responsible building. Their entry into the Boston market was big news in the industry, and apparently they were looking for local construction partners. That night, I researched everything I could find about Sustainable and their Boston project. They were planning a mixed-use development in the Seaport District, 6 buildings including office space, retail, and residential units. Their press releases emphasized their commitment to LEED Platinum certification and carbon-neutral operations. This was exactly the kind of project I had been preparing for throughout my education. Over the next week, I created a detailed proposal specifically addressing Sustainable's needs. I incorporated local building codes, sourced sustainable material suppliers in the region, and calculated potential energy savings that would appeal to their corporate values. I knew this information could help Morgan Construction secure the contract they desperately needed. The following Monday, my father called an all-hands meeting to discuss upcoming projects and priorities. Near the end, he mentioned the Sustainable opportunity. "This is a major potential client," he said. "We need all departments focused on making our bid competitive." I saw my chance and raised my hand. When my father reluctantly acknowledged me, I stood up. "I have actually been researching Sustainable's requirements," I began. "Their primary concern is sustainability and energy efficiency. I have compiled some information that might help our proposal." Before I could continue, my father interrupted. "We have our proposal strategy well in hand, Jesse. This is not the time for classroom theories. But I have identified local suppliers for the materials they specifically mention in their RFP," I persisted. "And I have calculated potential energy savings that would set us apart from other bidders." The room had gone uncomfortably quiet. All eyes darted between my father and me. "That is enough," my father said sharply. "We will stick with proven methods that have served this company for decades." As I reluctantly took my seat, my cousin James spoke up. "Actually, Uncle Robert, I have been looking into some efficiency improvements myself. Nothing too radical, but enough to mention in the proposal." My father nodded approvingly. "See, that is the kind of practical thinking we need. James, you will take point on the efficiency section of the proposal." I watched in disbelief as James outlined several ideas that were directly lifted from conversations I had tried to have with the team over previous months. The final insult came when he specifically mentioned a local supplier of sustainable insulation materials that I had identified in my research. After the meeting, I confronted James in the hallway. "Those were my findings you presented." He shrugged, not even bothering to deny it. "Difference is I know how to package ideas so they will be accepted. You come on too strong, cousin. No one likes a know-it-all." That evening, I requested a private meeting with my father. To my surprise, he agreed to see me first thing the next morning. I arrived at his office with my complete sustainability proposal, determined to make one last attempt at being heard. My father was reviewing paperwork and barely looked up when I entered. "I will be brief," I said, placing my proposal on his desk. "This contains everything Morgan Construction needs to win the sustainability contract. Local suppliers, cost projections, energy efficiency, calculations, and implementation plans. All I ask is that you review it." My father glanced at the document but did not touch it. "Jesse, this needs to stop. Your constant pushing for change is creating tension in the company. Either get in line with how we do things here or get out." His words hung in the air between us. For the first time, I saw the situation with perfect clarity. There was no future for me at Morgan Construction as long as innovation was seen as a threat rather than an opportunity. "Then I quit," I said quietly. My father looked genuinely surprised. "You would walk away from your family legacy over this?" "I am not walking away from our legacy," I responded. "I am trying to ensure it has a future, but you cannot see that." He stood up, anger flashing in his eyes. "You think a few years in a classroom makes you smarter than those of us who built this company. This just proves you do not have the Morgan backbone. When things get tough, you quit." His words cut deep, but I maintained my composure. "I am not quitting because things are tough. I am leaving because I cannot watch this company I love become obsolete when I know how to prevent it." The exit interview with HR was brief and uncomfortable. Word spread quickly throughout the office, and by lunchtime everyone knew I was leaving. Some colleagues expressed their regret privately, while others avoided eye contact altogether, not wanting to be seen taking sides. The following Sunday dinner at my parents' house was the most strained family gathering I had ever experienced. Relatives had clearly taken sides. Some thought I was being impulsive and disrespectful, while others quietly supported my stand on principle. My cousin James made several pointed comments about commitment and paying your dues. My grandfather pulled me aside as I was leaving. "I am disappointed," he said, which felt like a final blow until he continued, "Not in you, but in how this was handled. Sometimes the hardest thing is watching the next generation make the same mistakes you did. Your father is more like his father than he realizes, and your grandfather was stubborn too." In the weeks that followed, I distanced myself from family events. The pain of rejection was too raw, and I could not bear the pitying looks or the awkward attempts at conversation that avoided any mention of business. The dream I had held since childhood of eventually leading Morgan Construction had been shattered. The financial reality of unemployment quickly set in as well. Despite my qualifications, finding a position that valued innovation proved challenging. Established construction firms in Boston were as traditional as Morgan Construction, while newer forward-thinking companies were often too small to offer competitive salaries. I began to question my choices. Had I been too idealistic, too impatient? Should I have played the long game, kept my head down, and gradually introduced change? The doubt weighed on me heavily as I sent out application after application. 3 weeks after leaving Morgan Construction, I attended the Northeast Sustainable Building Conference in New York. I had purchased the ticket months earlier on the company card, and somewhat ironically, it had not been canceled. Though I considered not going to avoid the expense, I ultimately decided the networking opportunity was too valuable to pass up. During a panel discussion on integrating renewable energy systems into commercial buildings, I asked a detailed question about implementation challenges specific to historic structures like those common in Boston. After the session, a woman approached me. "That was an excellent question," she said. "Most people focus on new construction, and forget that retrofitting existing buildings is where the real sustainability challenge lies. Especially in cities like Boston, I agreed. We have strict historical preservation codes to navigate alongside modern efficiency requirements. You are from Boston? She asked with interest. Born and raised. My family has been in construction there for 3 generations. She extended her hand. Catherine Chen, CEO of Sustainable Developments. We are actually looking at several projects in Boston right now. My heart skipped a beat as I shook her hand. Sustainable, the very company whose contract my family's business was desperately pursuing. I introduced myself, deliberately leaving out my family name for the moment. Jesse Morgan, I said. I have a background in sustainable construction engineering. Morgan, she repeated, looking thoughtful. Any relation to Morgan Construction? There was no point in hiding it. My father and uncle own the company. Interesting, she said. They are bidding on our seaport project. Are you involved with that proposal? No, I replied honestly. I recently left the company due to some differences in vision. Rather than being put off by this admission, Catherine seemed intrigued. She suggested we continue our conversation over coffee, and for the next hour we discussed sustainable building practices, the challenges of implementing them in established markets, and my specific education and experience in the field. You know, she said, as our conversation drew to a close, Sustainable is expanding our Boston team right now. We need people who understand both the technical aspects of sustainable construction and the specific challenges of the Boston market. Would you be interested in joining us as a sustainability consultant? The offer caught me off guard. I would be very interested, I said, then hesitated. But I should be transparent. My family's company is bidding on your project. There could be a conflict of interest. Catherine appreciated my honesty. I respect your integrity. Let me be clear, we want to work with local contractors who share our vision for sustainability. If Morgan Construction can demonstrate that commitment, they will be considered on their merits, regardless of your relationship. Your insider knowledge of Boston's construction landscape would be valuable to us in other ways. Still, I was torn. Taking a position with Sustainable could put me in direct competition with my family's business. Think about it, Catherine said, handing me her card. We are not looking for someone to help us exclude local companies. We want someone who can help us find the right partners and implement our vision effectively. Over the next few days, I considered the opportunity carefully. Catherine had been clear that my role would not involve deciding which contractors were selected. Instead, I would consult on sustainability strategies for their Boston projects broadly. After several sleepless nights and a long conversation with my grandfather, who encouraged me to follow my conscience and use my gifts, I accepted the position. My first weeks at Sustainable were exhilarating. For the first time in my professional life, my education and ideas were not just tolerated, but actively valued. Catherine became something of a mentor, including me in strategic meetings and encouraging me to speak up when I had insights to offer. The Seaport project was Sustainable's first major development in Boston, intended as a showcase of their commitment to environmentally responsible building. As I learned more about their vision, I realized how perfectly my expertise aligned with their needs. I understood both the technical requirements of sustainable construction and the specific challenges of building in Boston, from permitting peculiarities to local labor considerations. When specific challenges arose, I often had solutions based on my intimate knowledge of the city's construction landscape. After I helped navigate a particularly complex zoning issue that could have delayed the project by months, Catherine began to rely on me more heavily. You have a unique perspective that bridges worlds, she told me. You understand cutting-edge sustainability and traditional Boston construction culture. That is a rare combination. 3 months into my tenure at Sustainable, I was given my own team to manage small, at first just 2 junior engineers and an administrative assistant. But as we successfully completed preliminary planning phases for several smaller projects, my responsibilities and team grew. 6 months after joining the company, Catherine called me into her office. The contractor selection for the Seaport project was nearing its final phase, and 5 local construction companies had been shortlisted. Morgan Construction was among them. I want to be clear, Catherine said. Your family connection will not influence our decision either way. The selection committee will evaluate each proposal on its merits. I appreciate that, I replied, and I want to formally recuse myself from any involvement in the selection process to avoid even the appearance of conflict. Catherine nodded approvingly. I expected nothing less, but that is not why I called you in today. The city has just announced a major municipal contract for retrofitting government buildings for energy efficiency. I want Sustainabuild to bid on it, and I want you to lead our proposal team. This new opportunity was massive, even larger than the Seaport project. If successful, it would establish Sustainabuild as a major player in Boston's construction market for years to come. Over the next 2 months, I threw myself into developing our bid. My team grew to include specialists in various aspects of sustainable retrofitting. We created a comprehensive proposal that addressed not just the technical requirements, but also demonstrated a deep understanding of Boston's unique architectural heritage and municipal systems. When our bid was accepted, beating out several established local firms, Catherine promoted me to Executive Director of Boston Operations. I would now oversee all of Sustainabuild's projects in the greater Boston area, including the municipal contract and the Seaport development. The municipal contract will require us to subcontract with local construction firms, Catherine explained during a planning meeting. I want you to lead the selection process for these partnerships. Your knowledge of the local industry will be invaluable. It was at this moment that I realized my new position would inevitably bring me into direct professional contact with Morgan Construction. If they wanted a piece of this massive municipal project, and I knew they would need it, they would have to present their qualifications to me. The irony of the situation was not lost on me. 6 months earlier, I had been deemed not qualified to contribute meaningfully to my family's business. Now I would be evaluating their qualifications to work on what could be their most significant contract in years. Sustainabuild opened its request for proposals from local contractors 3 weeks after we secured the municipal contract. As executive director, I established the selection criteria with an emphasis on demonstrated experience with or commitment to sustainable building practices. I then recused myself from the initial review process to maintain impartiality, especially knowing Morgan Construction would likely bid. My team narrowed the field to 8 contractors for final interviews. Morgan Construction had made the cut, which did not surprise me. Despite our differences in vision, they were still one of the most established and technically proficient builders in Boston. The interview was scheduled for a Wednesday morning in Sustainabuild's newly opened Boston offices. Catherine had flown in from New York for these final contractor meetings and insisted I attend despite my family connection. Your technical expertise is crucial for evaluating their claims, she said. I trust your professionalism to set aside personal history. I spent the night before the meeting in a state of anxiety, rehearsing professional responses to various scenarios. When morning came, I dressed with particular care, choosing a conservative suit that projected authority without ostentation. When my father, uncle, and cousin James entered the conference room, their expressions registered shock at seeing me seated at the table. My father recovered first, his face hardening into a mask of professional detachment. What is the meaning of this? He asked Catherine, who had risen to greet them. There is a clear conflict of interest here. Mr. Morgan, Catherine replied coolly. Jesse has recused himself from the selection committee precisely to avoid any appearance of impropriety. However, as our executive director of Boston Operations, his technical expertise is valuable in these discussions. If you prefer to reschedule with different personnel, we can accommodate that request, though it would delay your consideration for the project. My father glanced at my uncle, who gave a slight nod. That will not be necessary, my father said stiffly. We can proceed. They took their seats across from us, and I noticed James staring at me with undisguised hostility. My father began their presentation outlining Morgan Construction's 50-year history in Boston and their portfolio of successful projects. It was the standard pitch I had heard many times, emphasizing reliability, quality, and tradition. When he finished, Catherine asked the question I knew was coming. Your experience is impressive, but this municipal contract has specific sustainability requirements. Can you speak to your experience with green building methods? My uncle Thomas stepped in. While we have primarily focused on traditional construction excellence, we recognize the growing importance of sustainability. We have begun incorporating energy-efficient systems in several recent projects. Can you provide specific examples? Catherine pressed. My father shuffled through his notes, clearly unprepared for this line of questioning. We have used energy-efficient HVAC systems in our last 3 commercial buildings, he offered, though I knew these were standard systems required by updated building codes, not innovative choices. Catherine nodded, but did not seem impressed. As you know, this project requires LEED Gold certification at minimum. Have you completed any LEED certified projects? There was an uncomfortable silence before James jumped in. We have not yet completed a LEED certified building, but we have thoroughly researched the requirements and are confident in our ability to meet them. I remained silent, watching as they struggled to demonstrate credentials they did not possess. It was painful to witness, knowing how easily this could have been avoided if they had been willing to evolve their practices earlier. Then Catherine dropped the bombshell. Jesse has been instrumental in developing the technical specifications for this project. In fact, the entire Boston operation reports to him as executive director. His expertise in sustainable retrofitting of historic structures is why we brought him on board 6 months ago. The shock on their faces was profound. My father looked as though he had been physically struck. "You report to my son?" he asked Catherine incredulously. "On all Boston projects?" "Yes," she confirmed. Jesse's combination of technical knowledge and local expertise has been invaluable. His team developed the sustainability framework that all contractors on this project will need to follow. My cousin James let out a scoff of disbelief, quickly covered by a cough. My uncle's face had turned an alarming shade of red. But it was my father's expression that affected me most, a mixture of shock, confusion, and something that looked almost like reassessment. Catherine continued, unperturbed by the family drama unfolding before her. "Let me be clear about our expectations. This contract requires not just willingness, but demonstrated capability to implement advanced, sustainable building practices. We need partners who already understand these methods, or who are genuinely committed to rapidly developing that expertise." Finding my professional voice, I spoke for the first time. The specifications include requirements for energy modeling, waste reduction protocols, and sourcing of sustainable materials. I slid a document across the table. This outlines the technical standards that any contractor on the project will need to meet. My father took the document, his hand slightly unsteady. As he scanned the pages, I could see the realization dawning that these were precisely the kinds of standards and methods I had tried to introduce at Morgan Construction. James, ever eager to assert himself, jumped in. "We are already familiar with many of these approaches. In fact, I have been researching sustainable insulation options for several months now." Catherine looked at him skeptically. "Can you elaborate on which specific products you have evaluated and their relative performance metrics?" James faltered clearly out of his depth. "Well, there are several promising options on the market. Perhaps you could share the comparative R value and embodied carbon analyses you have conducted," I asked, knowing he had done no such research. The uncomfortable silence confirmed what everyone in the room now understood. Morgan Construction was not prepared for the requirements of this contract, not in their current form. Catherine closed her portfolio. "Gentlemen, I appreciate your interest in this project. However, I need to be direct as your proposal stands. It does not meet our minimum requirements for demonstrated sustainability expertise. If you are serious about being considered, you would need to significantly revise your approach." My father looked directly at me for the first time. "What would that entail exactly?" Before I could answer, Catherine responded, "That is something your team would need to determine. We have provided the specifications. How you meet them is up to you." The meeting concluded shortly after, with Catherine informing them they had 2 weeks to submit a revised proposal if they chose to do so. As they gathered their materials to leave, my father asked if he could speak with me privately. Catherine and the other Sustainabuild team members exited, leaving me alone with my father, uncle, and cousin. The silence stretched uncomfortably until my father finally spoke. "So, this is where you landed," he said, his tone unreadable. "It is," I replied simply. "Executive Director, my uncle," said, a mix of disbelief and reluctant respect in his voice. James remained silent, his expression sullen. "We need to talk," my father said. "Not here, not now, but soon. This changes things." I nodded, unsure what else to say. As they turned to leave, my father paused at the door. "You were right," he said quietly so only I could hear, "about the direction the industry is heading. I just did not want to see it." It was the closest thing to an apology I could have expected, and it left me standing there speechless as they walked out the door. My father called that evening, asking to meet at my grandfather's house the following night. "Neutral territory," he explained, his voice carrying a hint of weariness I had never heard before. When I arrived, my grandfather opened the door with a knowing look. "About time," was all he said before leading me to the living room where my father and uncle waited. James was noticeably absent. "Where is James?" I asked. "This conversation needs to happen between the three of us first," my father replied. We sat in awkward silence until my grandfather brought coffee and then pointedly left us alone. My father cleared his throat. "I owe you an apology," he began, the words clearly difficult for him. "I was wrong to dismiss your ideas without proper consideration." I remained silent, waiting for him to continue. The truth is, he went on, I was afraid. Changing our business model after 50 years seemed risky. What if we invested in new methods, and they failed? The responsibility of maintaining what my father built has always weighed heavily on me. The greater risk was doing nothing, my uncle added. We see that now. We have lost 4 major contracts in the last year to companies offering sustainable options. My father nodded. Your leaving forced us to take a hard look at our situation. The numbers do not lie. We are becoming obsolete. The admission clearly pained him, and despite everything, I felt sympathy. It is not too late to adapt, I offered. Many traditional construction companies are successfully integrating sustainable practices. We would not know where to start, my uncle admitted. That is why we are here. We need your help, Jesse. I was taken aback. My help? In what capacity? We want to revise our proposal for the municipal contract, my father explained. But more than that, we need to understand how to transition Morgan Construction for the future. You were right about the direction of the industry. We were just too stubborn to see it. Their request presented a complex ethical situation. I now worked for Sustainabuild, and any assistance I provided needed to maintain proper professional boundaries. I cannot give you insider information about the selection process, I said carefully. That would compromise my position and violate Sustainabuild's trust. But I can speak generally about industry standards and sustainable practices that are publicly available information. They both nodded in understanding. That is all we ask, my father said. We need to understand what we are missing. Over the next 2 hours, I outlined the fundamentals of sustainable construction, from material selection to energy modeling to waste management protocols. I directed them to industry resources, certification programs, and training opportunities. Throughout the conversation, I was careful to stick to information that would be available to any contractor serious about entering the green building space. As our discussion concluded, my grandfather reappeared, as if on cue. Progress, he asked. My father nodded. A start at least. Before I left, my father asked if we could continue these conversations. Not just for the proposal, but beyond that. We need to change course, and you understand this better than anyone. I agreed to meet again with clear boundaries established. Over the next 2 weeks, our discussions continued at my grandfather's house. Initially focused on the municipal contract proposal, they gradually expanded to broader questions about the future of Morgan Construction. My uncle brought their chief estimator and senior project manager to some of these sessions, acknowledging that the transition would require buy-in from key personnel. To my surprise, many of the staff were hungry for the change, having seen competitors succeed with new approaches. James eventually joined these meetings as well, his initial hostility gradually giving way to grudging respect as he realized how much he could learn. His background in business actually complemented my technical knowledge in useful ways. When Morgan Construction submitted their revised proposal to Sustainabuild, I recused myself entirely from the review process. Catherine understood the sensitive nature of the situation and respected my professional boundaries. The selection committee evaluated all proposals based on their technical merits and demonstrated capacity to meet requirements. 2 weeks later, Catherine called me into her office. I wanted you to know before the official announcement, Morgan Construction has been selected for the historic district portion of the municipal contract. Their revised proposal was quite impressive. I felt a complex mixture of pride and professional satisfaction. They have a deep understanding of Boston's historic buildings, I acknowledged. With the right guidance on sustainability, they could excel in that niche. The right guidance, Catherine repeated with a knowing look. I assume those evening meetings at your grandfather's house were productive. I started to protest, but she waved it off. Relax, Jesse. You maintained appropriate professional boundaries. We asked contractors to demonstrate capability or commitment to developing it. Morgan Construction showed genuine commitment and a solid plan for acquiring the necessary expertise. The first joint project meeting between Sustainabuild and Morgan Construction was understandably tense. As executive director, I would be overseeing their work, creating an unusual dynamic with my father and uncle. We navigated the awkwardness by maintaining strict professionalism, addressing each other by title rather than name in front of others. During this meeting, my father publicly acknowledged what must have been difficult for him to admit. Sustainabuild's expertise in sustainable methods combined with our experience with Boston's historic structures will create a stronger project than either company could achieve alone. We are committed to learning and evolving our practices under their guidance. It was as close to a public vindication as I could have hoped for. Over the following months, The collaboration proved successful beyond expectations. Morgan Construction invested in training their team in sustainable methods, hired several specialists in green building, and began the certification process for LEED credentials. My father and uncle gradually embraced the change, especially as they saw positive results. The municipal contract led to other opportunities as word spread about their new capabilities. They began winning bids they would have lost just a year earlier. Family dinners slowly became less strained. Business discussions, once forbidden at the table, now flowed naturally as the professional respect between us grew. My mother commented more than once how relieved she was to see healing in both the family and the business. 6 months into the municipal project, we celebrated the first building's completion on schedule and exceeding energy efficiency targets. At the small gathering of project teams from both companies, my father raised a toast to innovation and tradition, finding common ground, he said, looking directly at me, and to those who have the courage to challenge us to be better, even when we resist. It was the first genuine apology he had offered in front of others, and it marked a turning point in our relationship both professionally and personally. 1 year after that first tense meeting where Catherine revealed my role as her executive director, the municipal project was completed successfully. All 6 buildings had achieved LEED Gold certification, 2 even reaching platinum status. Energy costs for the retrofitted buildings had decreased by 38%, exceeding projections and garnering positive press for both Sustainabuild and Morgan Construction. My position at Sustainabuild had solidified, with Catherine expanding my responsibilities to include oversight of all New England operations. Meanwhile, Morgan Construction had successfully repositioned itself as a leader in sustainable retrofitting of historic buildings, a specialized niche that perfectly combined their traditional expertise with forward-thinking methods. The transformation in my father and uncle was remarkable. What began as reluctant adaptation had evolved into genuine enthusiasm as they saw the business benefits of their new direction. Monthly reports showed increasing profits and a growing portfolio of sustainable projects. They had even been featured in Construction Today magazine as an example of a traditional company successfully transitioning to green building practices. One evening, my father called with an unexpected request. "The board is meeting next week to discuss long-term strategy. We would like you to attend as a consultant. Your perspective would be valuable." "A consultant?" I asked, surprised by the formality. Well, he hesitated eventually. "We were hoping for more than that. Thomas and I have been discussing succession planning. In a few years, we will be looking to reduce our involvement. We would like you to consider returning to Morgan Construction in a leadership capacity." The offer caught me off guard. A year ago, it would have been everything I wanted. Now my feelings were more complicated. "I appreciate the offer," I replied carefully, "but I have commitments to Sustainabuild, and frankly, I am not sure mixing family and business again is the best idea." "I understand your hesitation," he said, "but things would be different this time. We have learned some hard lessons. Think about it, that is all I ask. No pressure, no deadline." I agreed to consider it, and to attend the board meeting as a consultant. When I mentioned the conversation to my grandfather, he chuckled. "Full circle," he said, "though sometimes the circle is more like a spiral. You come back to a similar point, but at a different level." "I am not sure I am coming back," I told him. "Maybe, maybe not," he replied. "But you have already changed Morgan Construction more from the outside than you could have from within. That is worth reflecting on." His words stayed with me in the weeks that followed. I had achieved what I originally set out to do, transform the family business for the future, though not in the way I had envisioned. There was a certain poetry to that outcome, a reminder that growth rarely follows the path we anticipate. The board meeting was productive, with open discussions about industry trends and strategic positioning. My input was not just tolerated, but actively sought, a complete reversal from my early days at the company. Afterward, my father asked if I would be willing to provide ongoing consulting to help them continue evolving their sustainability practices. "We would compensate you properly, of course," he added. "That is not necessary," I replied. "I am happy to advise informally. We are family, after all." He smiled at that, a genuine warm smile I had not seen directed at me in years. "Yes, we are," and I lost sight of that for a while. Over the following months, I maintained my leadership role at Sustainabuild, while providing occasional guidance to Morgan Construction. The arrangement worked surprisingly well, allowing me to influence the family business while maintaining my independence. In a way, the separation had been necessary. My father and uncle might never have recognized the value of my perspective if I had remained in their shadow. Sometimes respect can only be earned from a distance. The most profound change, however, was in our family dynamics. Business discussions, once a source of tension, now flowed easily at family gatherings. My cousin James and I had developed a respectful, professional relationship that gradually evolved into genuine friendship as we recognized our complementary strengths. At my grandfather's 84th birthday celebration, he pulled me aside. "You know what I am most proud of?" he asked. "Not the buildings we have constructed, though there are many fine ones. I am proud that the Morgan legacy continues to evolve. A business is like a living thing, it must adapt or die. You helped us adapt when we could not see the need." His words touched me deeply. I had never sought validation yet. Receiving it from him felt like completing a circle that had been left open. The journey from rejection to respect had been painful but necessary. I had learned that sometimes proving yourself requires leaving the safety of familiar territory. That innovation often faces resistance, especially from those with the most invested in the status quo. That true leadership sometimes means standing alone for what you believe is right. Most importantly, I learned that family relationships, like buildings, require solid foundations, but must also be flexible enough to withstand changing conditions. The pain of my father's rejection had eventually led to a stronger, more authentic relationship built on mutual respect rather than mere obligation. As I look back on this journey, I realize that being told I was not qualified was perhaps the most important qualification I could have received. It forced me to prove my worth, not through family connection, but through merit and persistence. It pushed me to find my own path rather than following one laid out for me. If you are facing rejection from those whose approval you seek, remember that sometimes the door that closes leads you to build your own doorway, a better one, with a view of possibilities others cannot yet imagine. I would love to hear about your experiences with family businesses or professional rejection in the comments below. Has anyone else found that a setback ultimately led to greater success? Drop a like if this story resonated with you. Subscribe for more real-life experiences and share this with someone who might need encouragement when facing their own closed doors. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, sometimes being told no is the beginning of your greatest yes.